Right. Okay. So before I start all this, I think if anybody is just having a casual look at what's on our television and in the media, you would think to yourself, particularly in the light of what I'm about to read you, that somebody is trying to destroy us. Every other advertisement is online gambling. It's junk food, which we know is not good for us. Endless junk food. We know that our supermarkets are putting all sorts of additives in things which are incredibly unhealthy. Every time you turn around, there's another advert for another SUV. They all look exactly the same, only £200 a month. On top of that, there's funeral plans, cancer, mawkish adverts for God knows what, all these different charities with the thing exactly the same. And every advertisement has mixed race couple, mixed race children, or homosexuals. Now you might think that I'm being racist, homophobic, whatever. You will see that as I read this stuff, that there is a very serious point to this. Every one of our races is important. If we mix them up, we get nothing but sickness. And we also lose our families, our family clans, which is the secret of happiness for human beings. So my mother's left all this stuff behind. She started getting the information in around 1973, and she continued to write it down. A lot of it on a terrible old typewriter with, the only way she had of correcting it was with Tipp-Ex, or one of those rubber things where you ended up with a hole. And then she wrote on top of the Tipp-Ex. So the whole thing is quite difficult. There's some quite interesting spelling in there. I thought she was very good at that. However, the basic tenet of all this is really quite amazing. And when you think about it, although some people could say it's not politically correct, it is tremendously interesting. And you look around at our governments and how they're arguing with each other and the wars that we're having. Where is the place for a good God, a God who cares about us, his little children? It seems to be very absent, doesn't it? So I'm just going to try and read through all these things to explain to us how everything is meant to be, how we've started off, about birth, about how we should be able to find somebody who is right for us, our family clans, abortion, which is a serious awfulness, and death, and all the things that really concern human beings. So I'll start off. I've got several things here about the creation of human beings, but there are several bits to it. So anyway, I'll start off with this one, which was, my mother did it on the 23rd of February 1984. So it says, the creation of humanity. In the beginning was God. It says in the Holy Bible, written and devised in time long past by ancient men, and translated over and over again by learned scholars, all of whom very, very, very ignorant, believing that the earth was round and flat like a saucer, and that above it there dwelt a wondrous God-like creature surrounded by his angels, to whom all of humanity went after death, there to remain in a permanent state of holiness, goodness, peace and love. This earthly life was but a common round and a dreary, I can't see what she's written, and dreary in comparison with what was to come. And we have to say, we all say, oh, he's gone to a better place, she's gone to a better place, without knowing anything about that so-called better place. Those who suffered indescribable tortures by their masters, religious or otherwise, were only being sanctified and strengthened, so that arriving on the other side, their earthly bodies shed, they would be congratulated for their fortitude, and gain perhaps a higher place in the order and scheme of things in heaven or paradise. This is the basis of all religious belief, and in a medieval world where electricity was regarded as an evil spirit or sprite, knowledge as to how the human body worked scant, motivation by a horse or usually by a donkey, and such things as have been developed within the last 100 years, something so wondrous as to be regarded as nothing but the work of the devil himself. The Bible was written in times when these were the beliefs of people who, if met in this modern world by a modern person, could only be regarded as beings very little better than animals, so crude, so ill-clad, and even dirty they would seem by modern standards. Anyone who wishes to come to real understanding of biblical times must watch with care the film Ben-Hur, which, thoroughly researched by non-religious men, portrays as nearly as possible the dastardly cruelty of the Romans and the horror of prisons into which any citizen, rich or poor, could be flung without trial or the slightest pretext. There was no justice, as it is known and understood by Western nations today in planet Earth. Let it be remembered that it has taken something like 10,000 years of non-recorded history and 5,000 years of partially recorded history for what you have now, a nearly modern planet, to be arrived at, and lives, even for quite poor, ordinary people, of comparative luxury. Terrible people who have no morals whatsoever would have their neighbours without the slightest remorse and even eat them, and yes, even in ancient England, rape their own sisters and daughters, need terrible religions to help to control them all. They have to believe that wickedness will be punished by an all-powerful godlike personage who in his great and fearful majesty looks down upon them and rewards or punishes. Death must not be feared, and sanctity and purity striven for. Sanctity and purity must be striven for, and honour and a strict moral code, if humanity is to survive at all. But once intelligent beings who have a very deep understanding of all things and cannot believe in simple ancient beliefs any more have been arrived at, then they must have a new message. And this, which will be a very carefully organised book, capable of being read by any reasonably intelligent 10-year-old, must be the message of for all time, to lead this modern world into new and deeper understanding, and we hope happiness. What is happiness for humanity in the end, for rich or poor alike? Even the simplest native, still to be found in darkest Africa or poorest India, is happiest within his own family, his own people, provided always that they are the right people. From the dawn of time in this planet, people have moved about. Norsemen from Norway, tremendous warriors of great strength, wonderful brave sailors, and great slavers. Saxons from Central Europe, some of them tall, strong men of fair complexion. Small, dark hill dwellers, white, brown, black, yellow, and all races are to be found the same types of people. Long-faced with high, narrow cheekbones. Short, round-faced with short features and low-set cheekbones. The selection is endless, and these can be found in all colours. They are also found in all types of animal. Walt Disney was a cleverer man than he knew, but he got it the wrong way round. Today you have computers, as yet not as complicated as they will become. And only with the coming of the computer is it possible for the scientists of this planet to progress in designing many, many things. It is the computer in all its complexity which is the part of the whole complex way that creation works. Who or what created it in the very first place, no one can possibly come to know or even understand. Beyond this part of the universe are billions upon billions of other planets similar to this one. Beyond that are other larger types of inhabited planets. Imagine a large swirling disk, dome-shaped in the middle, constantly moving, kept together by electricity and all sorts of swirling forces, too complicated for comprehension, which keeps the whole thing constantly moving all together as one unit. And then you have, in the simplest terms, what this universe actually is. So large, so tremendous that no one can possibly come to understand it, let alone travel very far within it. That there are planets which move in a very much slower way and are much larger than this planet and possibly inhabited by larger and much more intelligent beings, although similar in appearance, must be a fact. That they are constantly on the lookout for new and better people must be a fact also. Millions must work all together and constantly to help to create life within this universe, and for some their tasks are terribly tedious and boring and must go on for many centuries. The whole thing is like a network and must never, never cease. Are we evil men dictating these words to a simple housewife who now believes that this must be the message to save her humanity? no simple housewife, but one of the most, well, they're saying that my mother was once giving this message in the other planet. She was my mother and as fatally flawed as the next person, but there you go. We'll go on with it. But one of the most important queens that ever lived, snatched away after she had helped to give a similar message to her own planet, in the sister planet to this one, and dumped here when it was so primitive as to be horrifying. There is one great privilege to being of royal blood, and that is that unlike ordinary people, you can never be lost. Thousands upon thousands of those working unseen in this universe have been searching for her for over 2,000 years. Terrible things have been happening in the government of this planet, and we can only say, to put it simply, that this lady and her family are only lucky to be alive at all. We have won and are now ready to get to work with what we have set out to do and have done. Evil men there are everywhere, unfortunately. Divine beings and devils with horns, none. In the end, goodness does prevail. In the end, the basic goodness in humankind, and that is all that we also are, wins through. All of those things in the Christian Bible and other religious works appertaining to the judgment of mankind are true. All are judged, and in the end, those who commit wicked acts and are mean, especially as they do such things to their own loved ones, their own family, pay a terrible price for their crimes. This is true. So it is that where a planet does survive to proper modernity, with complete understanding, they return to true and high moral codes, love of justice, goodness and order, and a set of rules of humanity, which though perhaps strict, maintain all of those things that promote beauty, goodness, and in the end happiness for ordinary citizens, rich and poor alike. In the beginning, perhaps, there were some sort of beings. We cannot believe that there could only have ever been one creating. Or does life simply create itself in the beginning? Sorry, I haven't read that well. In the beginning, perhaps there were some sort of beings. We cannot believe that there could only have been ever one creating. Or does life simply create itself in the beginning? This complex question will never be answered. A swirling mass of basic elements is the very beginning, which in a billion, trillion years becomes a rock with a central core of fire, and all of nature works to a similar pattern in all things, even to the human body itself, with the human brain like a planet set in an oval to round outer skin which protects with inner forces swirling around the central mind, or swirling mysterious motivating forces within, just behind the eye, where the soul or basic entity, which is man, lives. In the beginning, when rocks cool down, when winds begin to die, when volcanoes cease to rock the planet, water, air, and light slowly take hold. Algae is the beginning, the basic amoeba, the very beginning of life forms. Everything must begin together, and all life is created in water, which is the basis of every living thing. Even in the womb, the human animal grows within a sort of water, inside the birth sac, where all the salts and other chemical substances necessary to aid growth protect the burgeoning infant. A planet undiscovered, having no spiritual, what else can it be called? But it is not that. We on your other structure are just as solid, visible and real and living as you are. And all of us must have lived in the physical world at some time, however long ago it might have been. All life must begin in the physical plane, and all thinking, intelligent creatures, including the stinging insect, live on two planes at once. Left to itself without help, a growing planet in the first place, an amoeba stage of its development, may take billions of years to begin to develop the first lowly sorts of animals. So it must be that work must go on, and we too have spacecraft, which must have to travel around our own area for hundreds of years, searching for emerging planets. Once found, then really hard work must begin to establish the first forms of animal life. Too complicated here is it to explain how all manner of insects, all sorts of forms, the basis of life in all its forms, progressing from one sort of creature to the other, its spiritual entity growing slowly with the sorts of different body it inhabits, in all its different millions upon millions of lives. Computers are used of the greatest complexity to scan these creatures, picking out only the very best in millions upon millions when they are ready to progress to something just a little more intelligent, just a little more capable of simply reasoning power. It is the stinging insect which must calculate exactly how to ensnare its prey, which progresses to the most intelligent creature in the end. In the end, people progress through the horse, the pig, the cow. Some are aquatic, beginning with the simple frog or lizard, swimming creatures. Others never come to happiness within water and progress through land-based creatures. Everything ends with some sort of monkey or baboon. Progression from there, you have the darker-skinned members of humanity, and the nearer the facial features resemble those of the basic monkey, as do many Chinese, even Japanese, many brown and black. The nearer they are to the basic animals from which they spring, and the more simple and easily preyed upon they are by more intelligent races, who sadly, without understanding or knowledge, kidnap them and use them as slaves. If this message had only been given in the 17th century, at least from the point of view of race, very much misery could have been spared a very large number of people who have all had to be slaughtered in one way or another because their creation has become a thorough mess. This is meant only to be a simple dictation, but it explains what everyone knows, and knows what it is like to be chased and possibly killed by an assailant, as he or she has experienced it many, many times, possibly in his or her development millions of years before, in some lowly stage of development. Humanity develops through race and in groups, and all basic things grow in groups. In this way they are safest and happiest and protected from their enemies. Monkeys and baboons of all sorts cling together in groups and develop their own way of inventing little laws for their own safety in living. So it is that every single character that lives in difference is different, one entity of itself, and very complex in a myriad of ways. How else could it be so that it takes millions upon millions of years to create one human being, even the lowlier ones? Human beings are not equal, and in the end, unless the white races unite together and rule over the coloured ones, then you will have carnage, destruction, and racial war. Now on your planet, because of the ignorance which has gone on too long, the lowly black, brown and yellow races exceed the white intelligent races by 3 to 1. This in itself is dangerous. The Chinese now are themselves taking drastic steps to reduce their numbers, but Africa and India and other countries must eventually be ruled by the white man, and the simple black man forcibly made to breed only as few as 2 or less children per man. There will only be one form of birth control for these simple people, and this will be vasectomy of males by laser beam surgery. I mean, this sounds appalling to our way of thinking, but by all means have 15 children, but don't expect me to keep them. And how many women want to be pregnant the whole time and then watch their children die of starvation? Many of these people are like children. They cannot feed themselves properly. And in their terrible distress, it is not beyond the bounds of possibility, if left as they are indefinitely, that their rulers could send missiles and atom bombs to the Western nations, in the simple idea that they could then seize all the power and wealth of the West. In that way alone, as in many others, this world could collapse into total war and horror, which in the end would simply put it back to chaos and ignorance of long times past. And we have already had trouble this last week with the Indians and the Indians and the Pakistanis, and they are both nuclear nations now. Luckily, what's his name? The cricketer. Anyway, he has diffused it for the time being. Reincarnation in intelligent white, most advanced races can only take place through the sowing of man and woman's own seed. So it was dictated to the writer in the very beginning. The power of love passes down from mother to son and from father to daughter. From the point of view of rebirth, a daughter is more used to a father and a son to a mother. There are a whole set of rules we must give to demonstrate to humanity how it is that people must, as far as possible, remain on the same structure. A very tall man who breeds with a very small girl of totally different colouring may have splendid children, but in the past scores of women died trying to bring children into the world through a father that was too large in stature, or of such a different brain pattern, and this is also very important to understand, as all people move in a different way and are different. The whole rhythmic way that the electrically motivated body works is a very important piece of understanding for everyone, most especially the medical profession, who, although brilliant, never look at the most simple things which should form the whole basis of knowledge in all fields. All nature is similar and follows a pattern which, when altered by man's folly, breaks down, and this includes man himself. The writer Grantley Dick Reed's book, Childbirth Without Fear, a deep-thinking man who asks the question, why is it that a simple peasant woman or a black woman or whatever, whose ancestors have remained working on the land for generations, can give birth almost without pain, put the child on her back and continue working in the field, whereas a civilized white woman remains ill for many days, even months, and sometimes complains of never feeling well again once she has given birth? He imagined that perhaps it could be something to do with civilized living. Nothing of the kind. It is hopeless mixture of humanity, which at the moment has not yet reached a dangerous stage. But once travel of an easy and cheap sort is attained, then all races will start to mingle together in a really dangerous way. If this knowledge does not become common to all people of all nations within a few years, even greater harm than has been done already will cause havoc in years to come. Hitler was without doubt a thoroughly wicked ruler, but he could see that the influx of Turks, Jews and mixed-race people of all sorts was doing this to his nations, of tall, strong, fair-haired German people, reducing them with intermarriage to all sorts to something very inferior. Calling anyone who was foreign and inferior Jews, he simply destroyed them, and 7 or 8 million or even more were destroyed. Terrible as it is, most of those people would have to be destroyed in some way or another, which sounds terrible to us. Jesus, the ex-ruler of your planet, stood very much in disrepute. Actually, before I go on with that, there have been some programs on, I think it was Channel 4 was doing quite a few at one time, where they would have the 60-stone man, or the girl with the 16-stone legs. These are people who have such appalling genealogy. They're not bad people, they're good people, but cast into a life of such suffering. And those people, according to this, will have to be they'll have to be, part of their entities will have to be dismantled, because nobody wants to live a life that ugly. Or like the elephant man, who was, the story of the famous elephant man who eventually committed suicide because he was a freak. He was incredibly brave, but his life was made a complete horror by what he had inherited. So this is what we stand in on the brink of right now. So I'll just go on with this bit about Jesus, the ex-ruler of your planet, stood very much in disrepute for allowing that particular piece of wickedness to happen. It is the lack of this message which has caused all sorts of other destruction, too numerous to mention, and the struggle for power in the halls of power here, that has failed to care enough to help living humanity. If living humanity fails, then we ourselves have nowhere to live either, and nothing lasts forever, nothing except the living entity itself, which cannot be destroyed. People must come to know the truth and how to breed better, stronger, taller, purer raced peoples, or this world's humanity will fail and have to be destroyed in the end. People can only have the bodies that they create for themselves. Indeed, if parents knew what it truly means when their tall, fair-haired daughter ends up marrying a brown man or a black man in terms of family future, they would indeed be forgiven for feeling that destroying the unfortunate black man. Colour is the same with humanity as it is in painting, and once a black person marries a white one, pale brown or black descendants must result. What should it matter, people say? It means all the wrong genes mixed up together in the end, a mess up which must be destroyed. To achieve a very high level of intelligence, looks, in stature and everything else, and no planet can be better than its humanity, complete knowledge must be given. Like goes with like, and not the reverse. A family of musicians are happy together. They speak the same sort of language and understand each other and come to greater happiness. And they've also found that people who have very musical minds very often have great ability with mathematics. So it's a particular kind of brain patterns which, you know, you will then create in a family. And in fact, there are many people living today. I believe that Nigel Kennedy was once Mozart. He doesn't create that music now, he still plays it, but he has that very musical mind. Handel has had several lifetimes as magicians, and he's now Howard Goodall. Again, a man who understands music in a mathematical way and still writes music. Extremely clever, brilliant man. And I think Vivaldi, the Red Priest, who was a very good person, is, who's that pop star? Ed Sheeran. He's Ed Sheeran now. So the same people come back, and they don't necessarily do the same things in the same life, but they have the same. They have that kind of a brain which goes on to do different things. So there you go. So where was I with the music people? A family of musicians are happy together. They speak the same sort of language and understand each other and come to greatest happiness. In ignorance, nice people who are yet of totally different origins come to found families together. In a few short years, perhaps they have a few pleasant children, but boredom inevitably sets in, not only with each other, but in every sphere of their private lives. This message will help, we hope, to bring greater happiness to people of all sorts. It is this lack of knowledge which has helped to create such discontent, such despair, such misery in splendid men who have given their very lives either in war or as saints, as they hoped that they were, that is, in itself as they hoped that they were, that this in itself has helped to destroy the government for this planet. Jesus made a terrible mistake when he made all his Roman Catholic priests celibate. Very few of them could therefore ever live again, and unless there was some previous lifetime that could be traced back and established for them. The television portrayals of the film The Thornbirds is part of our plan. A splendid man believing himself to be holy, giving up the most important thing of life for something which is a myth, a fairy story. Instead, he ought to have sought and won a woman of his own clan and race, and reared splendid children looking very like himself, and left a wonderful family growing hopefully to receive him back once more in a future lifetime. It only has to be imagined that the feelings would be of such a man when, after such a life of deprivation, he comes to these places and finds that Jesus Christ, who after all was only one man, does not greet every dying priest. Popes, yes, and persons of great importance, but not lowly priests who were not at the very top of their professions. Those who were close to Jesus came to know him for the person he truly was, and never let it be imagined that he did not exist, because he certainly ruled with enormous power for over 2,000 years. Humanity must have a variety of rewards, ranks, and something to look forward to, just and proper payment for services rendered, and this was never done. To the millions who served in the government we have just destroyed. A new order is rising up, and we hope it will bring greater happiness and better people in this planet of planet Earth. Of course, there are more and more people, and more all the time. Some have been in store for centuries, awaiting a chance of rebirth. Others have arrived from other planets, planets with either too many people already, or planets that have simply failed. Special people should be reincarnated over and over again, most especially royal persons, whose task it is to treat with foreign governments with great spectacle for people to maintain peace and order. People destined to bring together, to bring knowledge to govern, to run armies. People destined to bring knowledge to govern, to run armies. All of these only come to greatest maturity after many, many lifetimes. One lifetime is not enough. Does this answer the question of reincarnation or creation of life itself? The basic truth, perhaps, but your medical profession needs to make many, many simple experiments to come to complete understanding, an understanding which we hope all sensible people will take to heart, learn and live by in far greater happiness. There is very, very much more. Too long to continue for this chapter. So that's the end of that chapter. And do you want to finish that off? Right.